Welcome to day 2 of our implementing high leverage practices in individualized educational plans. A deeper dive into explicit instruction and specific feedback. You can access the agenda using this bit.ly link down here. And also in today's session, you will need your cell phone because we are going to play a Kahoot game. So make sure you have that ready. So in today's session, the learning outcomes from the takeaway task, you see, after day 1, we gave you some ideas, materials, and a book, and you were to share the learning from that day 1 by implementing that explicit instruction and feedback into your classrooms or with the teachers that you work with if you are in an administrative or coaching role, and also monitor student progress. So today in our learning outcome for the second day live meet is to analyze and share the impact of explicit instruction and feedback on student performance or teacher performance, and also provide feedback and connections to the other participants that you will be sharing with in your breakout rooms. So that's our overall process. Just zooming out, we met on March 22nd. That's our day 1, where you got your initial information about explicit instruction using the High Leverage Practices for Inclusive Classrooms book. And then you had that time to implement, monitor student progress, and then now we're on day 2, where you get to share out your grade in your grade bands. So here's our Kahoot game. And it's just a retrieval practice from what you have learned from day 1 and the pre-work in our Google Classroom. We're going to go ahead and skip this part for now. So here's the slide that everyone had a copy of. So you all had a specific slide in this entire slide deck presentation. And this is an example of what your finished product that you will need today could look like. So for the explicit instruction, you are going to discuss briefly the lesson that you implemented. For example, in this 4th grade reading, vocabulary and background. So knowledge and front loading. So here included a link of the lesson plan. So you can see here there's more detailed information on the lesson plan for this explicit instruction used in a 4th grade class. And also there's a link to a video of explicit instruction, and this is from Anita Archer's explicitinstruction.org. And here's the video, so you can watch it. And so with that, the examples that were used for this specific lesson is this one. That's a good way to use one of our vocabulary words. You must have put a lot of thought into that. That's an example of a goal-directed and immediate feedback given to a student versus great job, oh, good job, keep it up. It's very vague and it's not specific. So the other one is, I like how you went back to check how to read the examples for vocabulary words. That's very thorough. It's an example of constructive feedback. So at this time, you'll have 5 minutes to review, add to, and finalize the slides that you have. We don't want to put anybody on the spot, so please use this time to do that. Because after you have submitted your slides, we also have added comments to it. Feel free to review those comments so that you'll have those information and whatever revisions you might want to do before you do your breakout sharing with your small groups. Okay, so our 5 minute will start.
I don't mind going. My name is Cynthia York. I am Director of Special Programs in Barron County Schools. And of course, as an administrator, it's a little bit different to actually implement explicit instruction as a teacher would in the classroom working with students. So what I chose to do was I've been completing some observations in the last couple of weeks. And so I observed one of our teachers who was conducting a lesson. And one thing, of course, that we talked about, you can see there on the screen, as a result of ECE observation, I did utilize or attempted to utilize explicit instruction to discuss the use of a token economy after I observed her and did not see that in effect and could have been beneficial and turned out to be beneficial for use with a student. So that's how I did my explicit instruction practice. As far as challenges, it was difficult. You know, I think it would be easier to implement explicit instruction either with a larger group of participants, such as a classroom of students, or even at a professional development for for a class of teachers or a group of teachers. Part of an observation and then just following up with her as part of her summative and going over that token economy, trying to use explicit instruction. It wasn't, as perfect as it could have been, I think, under different circumstances. But we did do it, and it was okay. Can I say I implemented all parts of explicit instruction as part of that? No, I did not. But the parts that I did, I think, were useful.
Right.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I was able to capture that in our note catcher. So if I think we had someone else that was going to try to speak to their slide.
So sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I will say something about my slide. Okay, I think the thing which helped me most is about the TPR. I use TPR to help students understand what I want to say. And about the feedback, yes, I just every time I try to give the students the correct concept every time. I don't say whether he's correct or wrong. I just say the right concept once more so the students understand what is correct. About because I teach language, I teach Chinese, so about the sentence, I will have the students to read examples, just read examples and understand the examples. Then the students summarize the grammar rules. So if the students, they just read many examples, they will have some feeling about the grammar. Then finally, when they do the sentences, they have correct sentence. So that's what I said. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know. My cell phone is wrong.
All right, Miss Rudd, I think that's the last one that we have.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
So I used mine in a 10th grade geometry lesson. So they were using isosceles and equilateral triangles, and learning how to solve for missing angles and sides on that. So we started with reteaching vocabulary that was important, how to classify triangles by sides, how to set up equations to solve. And then they also color coded their notes to better see those relationships, and then modeling how to set up equations. And then some of the feedback, I tried to be a little bit more specific, just to kind of guide them from, okay, you can classify this triangle now, since you know that these sides are equal, what are you going to set them equal to? And from there, the challenge, I think, was just that the class is at different levels. For some, they're still kind of struggling with, setting up equations like we've been doing all year, but others grasp the content very quickly. So then it caused the ones that maybe aren't grasping it as quickly to kind of shut down, and they didn't want to answer because they didn't want to seem like they didn't know as much as the others. And then also in that block, there's 2 classes being taught, Algebra 2 and Geometry. So it
Wow.
feels like there's a little bit less time during the day to go over each and every piece. But I did think breaking it down more, like some of the practices we had talked about, helped some of them grasp it a little more quickly.
Good. All right, perfect. All right. So on our note catcher, I was able to just maybe put just a little bit of what your slide was about. And if you said something about either a highlight or a concern or a connection, I don't know if anybody has any questions that they would want to add to our note catcher. Or like Miss Rudd's thing about time. Of course, I don't know how that's probably where the barrier, where it comes to rub, I think the most is when we're trying to provide that explicit instruction and we're racing against the clock, especially if you have 2 different content areas in a room. That would be difficult to provide specific feedback and not just a broad feedback.
Okay, so I just kind of did a little recap on this little note catcher for everybody as you went.
Okay. I don't have anything else. Ms. Abshire, do we have anything else that we need to add for our note catcher?
And then Michelle and yours.
No, but unless you have any other questions for the others who presented, or did you find any while you were providing explicit instruction or scaffolding or feedback? Did you come across some wondering during your implementation?
I think sometimes maybe somebody else might feel this way too, is I don't know, as we get up in as the grades increase. So whether you're in 6th grade or when you're 8th grade or when you get into high school, it's more difficult to connect the prior knowledge with students, knowing where students actually are in a unit. And so sometimes providing that explicit feedback is hard if you don't know where a student is with their prior knowledge in that. And that I felt like that was kind of a struggle for the teacher that I was working with. She didn't know that, and I, not being in the classroom every day, didn't know that. And so it took, but it was informative for us because then we knew where we needed to start to help gain some prior knowledge and student understanding before we went through. So I did think that was something that was interesting and eye-opening for us.
That's a good point. So how did you know about your students' background knowledge?
So we had to take a second, and they are using the Malala speech. And so just trying to so we did a quick bell ringer and trying just to paint the demographics of the area before we went on in. They had just finished up one book. We were transitioning to another book. A heroes unit is what they were working on. And she should have worked on some lessons prior going into just starting to read. And so it was just through questioning that we were able to assess prior knowledge. It was a simple little formative assessment.
Excellent. In the form of a bell ringer. So yes. Was the response, was it written, or did they get to pair and share with their partners?
So we did a Jamboard. And so they wrote on the Jamboard and did Jamboard and kind of paired and then pulled out small group based on that. And then from that, we were able to pull back in and go forward. We'd have liked to do some shoulder buddies, but with COVID, the Jamboard was easiest.
That's excellent. So I heard different modalities.
Unplug.
Yes.
Okay, I feel like I got sucked into the portal because I was in mid-sentence when the breakout rooms closed.
Well, it looks like everyone's back. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us back here. I just wanted to take a moment to see if there was any ahas, celebrations, struggles, challenges that anyone shared in their breakout room that they would like to just bring to the forefront here, because I think we're all in similar situations and we do understand that technology is not being our friend right now. So if anyone would like to unmute and share or put something in the chat.
Jennifer, is it okay if I don't mean to put you in the spot, but you shared something good. If you don't care to share it with the whole group, your what you just shared towards the end of our breakout discussion.
Yeah, I don't care at all. Just the checklist that you had provided, I kind of went through that after one of my Sunday system lessons. And that's the reading program that we use here in our district. And I'm a huge fan. Um, but based on following the system as it's laid out, it is kind of scripted, but it also includes a lot of that modeling. It's an errorless learning so that the students don't learn wrong and then we have to reteach them. Um, so there is a lot of those multiple examples and demonstrations. And then the verbalize, it says, do you think aloud as you model? Again, our program is scripted, so I do use that a lot, but then I also have to individualize it based on my groups, the levels of those groups, the cognitive level of those groups, just to make it fit for them. And then opportunities for practice. The lesson that I based this off of had tons of guided practice, but the independent practice wasn't that.
We didn't catch the last part, Jennifer, but we did catch a good part of what you shared. And I know the other Jennifer too has some connections to make because she was able to assess prior knowledge in the beginning of her explicit instruction. And I'm gonna ask you to share this one too, Jennifer.
Okay. So the prior knowledge that we were able to determine was, well, something that we came about through the explicit instruction was that we made the assumption that they had the prior knowledge to the lesson that we were going to go into. So when we realized once we got into the lesson and we were working on our feedback to them, is that they didn't have those prior connections. And so we were able to open up a Jamboard because of COVID. They were able to get onto their devices and we were able to ask just out loud questions and students were able to respond, which then automatically grouped them into sections. So then we were able to talk with those small groups about using explicit instruction and build that prior knowledge before we continued. So it's almost like we started a lesson, paused a lesson, collected some more information, went back into the lesson to add to it. And so one of the things that I thought that was brought about through explicit instruction that was a great teaching tool with the teacher that I was using or the teacher I was working with is that connecting that prior knowledge is key. And you get that a lot of times with the explicit instruction guided questions that you can ask students.
Thank you. That's wonderful that you were able to make that connection and also determine what they needed before teaching them, because that is very important. Thank you all for participating today. I love hearing what has happened, seeing the responses, even for those that couldn't participate live today. It was a wonderful thing. Let me see if I can share before we move on. Okay, Katrinka.
All right. So for your next steps, we would like you to continue implementing HLPs, right? Especially explicit instruction and feedback, and monitor your students' progress. I love that you're being responsive already, but explicit instruction and feedback are SDIs. So if we're monitoring our students' progress, we can determine if that's being effective. Okay, so, and that sometimes takes a little longer than the time we had between March and this meeting in April. Continue to use reflective practices. Look at what worked, those celebrations, and what maybe didn't work. and improve from there. Make a plan for yourself. We would love to have you join us for future Communities of Practice and HLP trainings next year. Also, in your agenda, you will see that there is a link to retrievalpractice.org. That is a fantastic resource to continue using retrieval practice. If you sign up for their newsletter, a lot of times they will send a strategy to you, but they also have a phenomenal list of resources on the website. Okay, so you might want to bookmark that.
Thank you, Katrinka. So those are our next steps. And again, thank you for sharing your time with us and for being willing to learn something new and bring something back to the teachers and students that you work with, that to the communities that you serve. Other than that, we don't have anything else for you guys. Keep up the great work. And if you have any questions, you know where to find us at greg.org. Thank you guys and enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have a great weekend. Bye.